joined us. We are now starting the segment of the Neighborhood Food Network call. Thank you very much for joining us. And today we have a special guest, and her name is Haley Diem. Am I saying that correct, Haley?
Yes.
Yay, great. Haley is the Education and Outreach Coordinator at the One Vegetable, One Community Program. She's a resident urban farmer, and for DCGP, is that
Is the Duluth Community Garden Program.
Okay, great. Yes, at Giving Gardens, and she's currently a graduate student at University of Minnesota Duluth, yay, and in the Masters of Environmental Education program, where her research focus is sustainable agriculture and food education. And her vocation is to combine her experiences and passion for both teaching and farming, and to provide quality experiential learning opportunities to support our community in being healthy, happy, informed individuals while creating a more sustainable local food system. Yay, right up our alley. Thank you so much, Haley, for being with us.
Of course. Thank you for having me. Would you like me to share my screen with the presentation on it?
Let me multiple participants. Okay, great. Yes. So you can share your screen. That's fabulous. Haley's going to talk with us about, you want to tell us first the topic that you're going to talk about? And
yeah, definitely. So like you said in the introduction, I am with the Duluth Community Garden Program, and one of the grants that one of my big projects is called the One Vegetable, One Community Program. So that focuses on a featured vegetable of the year each year, which is voted on by our community. This year is tomatoes. So there's a lot to learn about tomatoes, right? They can be finicky. There's just a lot that goes into taking care of them. So that will be the focus of my presentation today. And I'll also, if there's time, I can touch on the importance of community gardening and maybe how to participate in a community garden program.
Great. And we'll leave a few minutes for questions at the end, around, like 10 minutes to 9 or something like that.
Sounds good.
Okay, great.
So
go ahead.
Site selection for tomatoes. They are a full sun vegetable. So what that means is they need 6 to 8 full hours of sunlight a day. Like most vegetables, they appreciate good well draining soil. So that's a mix of sand, organic matter, loam, and okay. So I'm gonna kind of talk at you for a while first, and then I'll get some images in here. But the soil, before you plant anything, I'm sure you guys all, well, actually, I'm not sure if you have gardens yet, but if you're thinking about starting a garden, even if you have a garden right now, it's always a good idea to get a soil test done. And there are really great, usually low cost opportunities for this at your university extension. So I'm not sure where everyone is located at, but for me, that's University of Minnesota Extension. You mail in your sample. It's maybe like about $17, and they give you great, very detailed results back, which will help you amend your soil and get better results in your garden. You want to be careful with tomatoes about over applying nitrogen early on, because it just promotes foliar growth. So they will just put all of that nitrogen into their leaves and they won't fruit. So you'll have a jungle with no tomatoes. So you want to be careful about that.
So what do you mean? If you don't mind, I'm going to interrupt you now and then if I have a question while you're talking about. So what do you mean by early on? Is that within the first couple weeks or the first days, or what do you mean by early on?
So before they set fruit.
Oh, that's what I did wrong. Okay, so I put nitrogen. Yeah, I did nitrogen fertilizer before they had fruit, and that's why they're crazy, bushy, gigantic, leafy bushes. Okay.
Jungles. Yes. So hold off on the nitrogen. And actually, I find that blood meal is better for while they're fruiting. It kind of gives the nutrients that they need for fruiting rather than for foliar growth. So nitrogen equals foliage is another way to think about it. So if you're growing like lettuces or spinach or kale or something, that's great. Tomatoes, you don't want their leaves really to grow. You want them to be, potassium is promotes even fruiting. So I usually do like potash, that gives potassium, and I have slides of this later, and blood meal. And really actually just compost, like a really great finished compost.
And you do the potash. So this is just ashes from a campfire kind of thing, right?
So hardwood specifically, but you can purchase it. Let me get to this next photo. So you can see the little red pellets. I got this just from like an agricultural supply store from when I lived in Iowa. And that, yeah, I'm not sure. I guess I've never really like gone to a garden center and purchased potash, but you could make it yourself, maybe out of hardwood ashes.
And when would you put that on? When it's fruiting?
So you can see here in this photo, I like to do a side dressing fertilization. So there's several different times that you could do this, but you want to be careful about burning the stems. So if you just shake it down on the plants and it's touching the stem, it can have like a chemical burn, and also not really go into the soil or where it's needed at the roots of the plant. So after transplant, I'd say maybe 2 or 3 weeks after transplant, you can tell by this photo, they're established but not fruiting yet. I would do a line right down the side, shake in the nutrients, the amendments that I was selecting, and then rake it over. So that way it doesn't wash away in the rain and get into our water system, and all that. And it's right where the plant needs it. So right by its roots. In our farm, when we started our farm, it was only 1 part per million nitrogen we found out from the soil test. So this is a organic composted turkey manure, which is super high nitrogen. That's the first number, NPK. So 8 to 4, it's the relative ratios of those nutrients in the bag. So nitrogen was 8, P, phosphorus was 2, and K, potassium was 4. That's what I was putting on my tomatoes, but that would vary depending on what your soil is. So it's super important to get that soil test if you're having troubles with your crops. Another thing that people often will not realize with tomatoes is that they need at least 2 feet in between each other. So they'll try and, I see a lot of people getting really into the square foot gardening, and I've never looked into it myself, but for some reason they come away with the idea that everything can go 1 foot apart, and that's not true. Tomatoes need 2 feet unless you're doing like an intensive pruning situation.
And that's 2 feet on each side.
So from center to center.
Okay, so 2 feet total. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
I doubled that, and like
Yeah.
Jen said, I have a massive jungle.
Yeah, minimum. So and that's with hard pruning. So yeah, it makes me cringe to see when people plant them any closer than that, because it is just impossible. Another thing, when you're starting tomatoes, so they can be started indoors 6 to 8 weeks before your first frost. In Duluth, that's like mid-April, so it depends on where you live, but so you can start them early, but don't start them too early, otherwise they'll get leggy and unhealthy by the time that you transplant them. And when you transplant the tomato, up to 1/3 of the living plant can be buried, and it actually appreciates being buried. So if you think about a tomato stem, it has all those white hairs on it. They're very hairy plants. All of those become roots when buried. So it helps stabilize the plant and helps jumpstart its growth if you bury it up to 1/3 when you're transplanting. For watering, this is especially important when they're fruiting. Otherwise, you may get blossom end rot. Basically, all the diseases that I know of, I shouldn't say that. A lot of the diseases that I know about with tomatoes have to do with how you water them, right? So if you are watering inconsistently, that can lead to blossom end rot during the fruiting stage. So for tomatoes, you want to water deeply and not on their leaves at all. They do not like their leaves wet, but let it dry out thoroughly in between waterings. So what that does for most plants, is it promotes root growth. It's forcing the roots to search for water versus shallow, frequent waterings, which just promotes surface roots, not those nice deep tap roots that have access to water in dry times. So when they kind of thoroughly dry out, and this is very easy test, just stick your finger in up to like first or second knuckle. If it feels totally dry, you can water deeply, soak it very well. Don't get the leaves wet. Sometimes people do shortcuts and put a sprinkler on their garden. It's probably the worst thing that you could do with tomatoes because it keeps the leaves wet consistently, and that breeds disease, which brings me to mulching. Sorry, I'm kind of throwing all this at you very quickly, but to have a barrier between the bare soil and the plant is really useful for tomatoes, because a lot of these pathogens that transfer to the plant actually live in the soil. And so when you get, maybe you'll notice after a really hard rainfall, there's backsplash of the soil up on the plant, and that introduces the pathogens to the plant. So if you have straw, even landscape fabric, wood chips, leaves, something as a barrier between the bare soil and the plant. And
I had purslane growing like crazy, and I just let it go. It's like laundry mulch.
Yep, that's great. And it's dual. It's more than dual purpose. It's many purpose, right? So you're preventing erosion when there's a rainfall if you're having purslane as a living mulch at the bottom of your tomato plants, and it helps conserve water evaporation. So you're watering less if you have a mulch down, which is water conservation techniques are always important, especially as we're moving forward with climate change. So let's look at a picture of how to properly prune. I like to call this an armpit. I don't know if you guys can see my cursor at all.
Yes.
But
I'm still seeing, okay, now I can see it. Okay, great. Yeah, prune.
There's this little prune suckers, and there's a little blue arrow, and then there's this sort of, I call it the armpit. So this is exclusively how I prune. And you can catch them. If you catch them early, you can just pinch them off. It's very easy. Or if you've let it go too long, just search for where there's like, I guess, multiple leaders, and try to select a central leader and just isolate one and go with that. So this leads me to types of trellising. This is my garden. I took this like 2 days ago. I just tied up my tomatoes last week because we're having a very slow summer. It was very wet and cold here. So I just staked them up. I use a single stake technique in my small garden space. When I farmed in Iowa, I used the Florida weave, which I'll show you a picture of. And during my time greenhouse growing tomatoes, I used like a top down or string technique for trellising. So depending on your growing system, you can choose what's right for you. I hate tomato cages. Maybe they're fighting words, but
they're also expensive. They're expensive. $50 each. And if you're growing 30 tomato plants, that's very expensive.
Yeah. They're expensive. They get bent. They are top heavy and they just fall over. You can't really get in to prune. You can't really reach into harvest. I feel like it just becomes like a cone of foliage. So I'm not a fan.
We had a bad storm, and I had a huge plant, and it fell over, and I had to just leave it for the whole summer.
Yeah. I mean, it's just those tiny little wires in the ground. Yeah. So in the single stake technique, I use about maybe 3 foot minimum, 3 foot to 5 foot stake. Place it maybe 2 inches behind on the north side of the plant, so it doesn't block the sunlight. Prune them pretty hard before I stake them up. Like I said, kind of isolating that central leader, the central stalk. And then I rip like old t-shirts or other like 100% cotton. You can do like cotton jersey is nice. Like some people use pantyhose. I try and stay away from like nylon or polyester because if I forget it in the garden, it'll eventually decompose. But kind of wrapping them under their arms so they're supported, and softly tying them to the stake. So If you're using twine is fine, but if it's windy where you are and there's like constant rubbing and it can be sharp and it's a singular point, it can kind of harm the plant. They'll survive, but I like to baby them a little bit with the cotton cloth.
Yeah. We just cut up a t-shirt.
Yeah,
like
old
strips,
t-shirts
yeah.
are great.
Yeah, jersey t-shirt, it's easy. Yeah.
Yep. So this one on the left, that's the single stake method that I just talked about. The one in the middle is the top down or like the string method. So there's these plastic clips. I think they're pretty much exclusively used in greenhouses, but I have seen it done in some of our community garden plots. You need a support up high, like a vertical, I guess it would be horizontal, but it'd be up high that you tie the strings to, and then it comes down. As they grow up, you clip them in. This isn't even a really good picture of it because I would put the clip closer under this this fruiting branch here to help support that. So that's not even really doing anything in that placement right there. And then on the right is the Florida weave. So you stake T-posts, heavy duty T-posts on maybe every 5 feet or so, and then wrap them with twine. So it sort of sandwiches them in place. So it's popular for field growers, commercial growers. I think that's why it's called the Florida weave.
So as the plant grows up, you're weaving it through.
Yeah. Yep. So this picture also isn't how I would do it. So they have like an extra foot on top where you can see there's twine and there's no plant growing, but I would just go through and weave like maybe every 6 inches to a foot as the plant grew, and then prune at the time of weaving.
So would you prune the top when you don't want it to grow any higher than your support structure? Do you just snip it, or do you just let it grow as far as it will grow?
I let them go. Yeah.
Okay.
As long as you're pruning hard, the suckers and any bottom foliage, that tells the plant to put in energy into the fruit. And I'm not sure hormonally with the plant what happens when you take off the top, but I imagine it might invigorate it in a way that it wants to grow more foliage. I don't know the science behind that, but that would be my intuition would say we're basically trying to get the plant to complete its life cycle because we want to eat its yummy fruit. So encouraging it to focus as much of its energy onto the fruit itself. So yeah, I don't know what would happen if you take off the top, but I don't.
Share one picture real quick. I just came from a permaculture garden, and they had the stakes like you said here, but they used bamboo, which is free, FYI, in between.
Oh.
And they're, I don't know if these were strings or nylon cords or what, and you can see the tomato plants being woven, just like you said, up through here, and they've got straw.
Here, I'll stop my share.
Yeah, we can't see it then.
Oh, you can't? Okay. Okay,
No,
now can you see it? Okay, sorry. So yeah, so you can see the bamboo is free, and that they've got that in between. They've got the straw on the ground, and they're weaving their tomato plants up through, like she just mentioned.
What do you mean it's free? Because I know it's not free here. It grows down there.
Sorry. Yeah. I mean, where I live, there's bamboo. It's like by the roadsides, and like it's available for a lot of people in this area anyway, for free. Yeah. But I guess you can also buy it, and it's inexpensive. You don't have to buy the metal stakes, is what I'm saying, for every single thing in between here. Okay. I'll stop share now.
Then only time for questions. I just want to note, when you're harvesting tomatoes, don't store them in the fridge. It's one of my biggest pet peeves when people put tomatoes in the refrigerator because it ruins the flavor and the texture of the tomato. I also like to store tomatoes upside down, especially the large heirloom type tomatoes, because they're actually ripening from the bottom of the fruit. So when you set them on the counter on their bottom and they're all squishy, it makes them go bad faster. So I flip them upside down on the hard part where it came off the stem, off the vine, and it helps it ripen more evenly on the counter.
So we had a question about blossom end rot. said, Samantha Costa said, my one tomato plant is experiencing blossom end rot. Is the entire plant done for? I read adding lime could fix it for adding calcium, but I was wondering if I should bother and pull the whole plant.
Yeah, so one of the biggest factors leading to blossom end rot is that uneven watering that I talked about. So you want to make sure that it's not going through like a period of wetness and then a long period of dryness. So that frequent, like if you're doing like frequent shallow waterings instead of a nice deep watering. So maybe think about how you've been watering. Definitely remove the affected fruit, but the whole plant isn't done for. In the future, I don't know if in the season the plant would be able to accept the calcium that you're talking about, but crushed up eggshells usually works well. And then it also, if you sprinkle them around the plant, the crushed up eggshells also work as like a diatomaceous earth that will cut the bellies of soft-bellied insects like slugs, and then they'll die. So dual purpose for crushed up eggshells around.
And then Mark said water in the AM to prevent fungal infection overnight due to increased humidity conditions.
Yeah, and pruning too will help, increase that airflow between the plants. So where I said before, like a lot of diseases are caused by moisture. That's why we prune as well, to promote airflow within the plant itself.
So you can prune more than just those little suckers, like especially down in the bottom of the plant.
Yeah.
I heard, right? Because it prevents the jumping up of the bacteria when the water splashes. You can prune off a couple of the branches on the bottom.
Exactly. Yeah, as it grows up.
And did I read somewhere that it's never too late to prune? Like my wild jungle, like can I go in there and just take out a bunch of foliage?
Yeah, I'd say never take more than a third of the plant
Okay.
at a time. Yeah.
Okay.
If Zen's garden looks anything like mine, it'd be a long time before I could get to a third of my plants. I planted mine a foot apart.
Oh no.
I have over 70 plants in my garden right now, and
that's too close. So
a lot of the stuff that I didn't prune is now bearing fruit. So I can't bear to cut it off because it's bearing fruit.
Yeah, you want to cut the other stuff.
But I am trying to get underneath where there's no fruit on it. I'm trying to cut all that so that there is some airflow under there. But yeah, I've learned a lesson, I hope.
Somebody asked about blight. Is that when the leaves get yellow with black spots on it?
Yeah, so that's one of the pathogens that's due to moisture and the backsplash of the water up on the leaves. It's a soil-borne pathogen.
So what do you do when you live in an area like mine where sometimes it just downpours? I mean, would you like cover your tomatoes? No. I mean, no. What you can't do anything about that, right? It just
mulch. You can mulch it, and you can also remove the blight infested leaves. But then you'll want to make sure that you dip your pruners or scissors in hydrogen peroxide or a bleach solution before you move on to pruning healthy parts of the plant. So you could go through and prune affected leaves, and that might help it for a while. Like I said before, we're basically just trying to keep these plants alive to help them complete their life cycle so we can eat their fruit. So it's okay. It doesn't make the fruit inedible. You're just not supposed to can blight spotted tomatoes. So the fruit itself can sometimes have those black spots on it. They're safe to eat, just not recommended to can them in salsa or marinara. So
if it has black spots on it, just eat those fresh. Don't can them.
Right. Yeah.
Can you cut out the black spot and still use them?
Yeah, you can cut them out and eat them.
Yeah. Okay.
I didn't know about. I grow Rose de Bern, which is a fabulous heirloom tomato, and they get nice and big. I didn't know about putting it upside down, so I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, I've never really read anything about that, but when I was transporting, hundreds of pounds of tomatoes to market, they would just turn to mush and rot when I was transporting them that way. So it's funny, I'm over at friends' houses and turning their tomatoes upside down, and then they turn them right side up, and then I turn them upside down. But it seems to work.
You can see when they're on the vine too, the bottom gets redder.
Yeah.
Or the
Yep.
top does, and then sometimes you knock it off by accident or whatever, and you want that to keep it will continue to ripen on your counter, right? You just
Right.
turn it upside down. That's all.
Yeah, especially too, because like a lot of those heirlooms will have cracks in the top, and I find that the fruit flies, I put it like a tea towel down, put them upside down, and then the fruit flies don't bother them because there's no open wounds on the tomato. Even like sometimes, they're attracted to those cracks in the heirloom tomatoes.
Yes. Yeah.
But
And
I
if you
love
if
learning
we
new
have to-
stuff.
I know, this is good.
There's so much. Now, if we have to, I know we're not there yet, but if we have to harvest some green tomatoes because a frost is coming in the fall, can you still ripen those on the counter? Does that work?
if you don't have a choice, I feel like there's some gardeners that always do that because they're worried that a squirrel will come by and eat it, but I don't like the flavor or the texture of that, so I would probably just do like fried green tomatoes, or
Oh, okay.
you can try it. I don't know.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of the green doctor's tomato?
No.
All right, I'm growing those, and now I'm sitting here wondering, well, how am I going to know when they're ripe?
Smell.
Oh,
So yeah, smell is a great.
Yeah, but
sense.
how do I know I'm not smelling a tomato that's less than a foot away from it? I'm just kidding.
Your nose will know. It'll smell like yummy. It'll smell ready.
Is it the same with the black tomatoes? I've got those black atomic tomatoes. I don't know when they're ripe. Is it when they're kind of soft? Would they get softer?
Yeah, and you don't want to manhandle them because they'll bruise easily, but you could try and see how much it gives when you squeeze it, smell it, give it a little squeeze. I see that someone wrote, "Why can't you can tomatoes with blight?" That's just, I mean, it's totally up to you, but that's like university extension rules / like USDA canning recommended rules. So you can do whatever you want, but I probably wouldn't risk it because the consequences are quite high if you improperly can, especially tomatoes because they're low acid.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Anybody else have any other questions for Haley?
I have a question. This is Joan. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So I have 26 tomato plants, and my life got busy, and I took out the suckers in the very beginning, and then weeks later, I went out there today, and it was unbelievable how many new suckers with tomatoes. And maybe you answered this question. I mean, I felt so bad to take off those suckers that have all these wonderful tomatoes. So what I did was I took my t-shirt that I cut up and I just made this big kind of contain them with my tie from the t-shirt. Do you suggest I go in there and just cut off those big suckers? What do you suggest I do?
I'd say don't feel bad about taking off suckers that have fruit on them. Anything that you remove will help the plant direct energy towards the fruit that is remaining on the plant. And so kind of just going in.
Oh, I have chickens. Can I give them to the chickens?
Yeah, chickens love tomatoes. Could do that. Yeah, remove the emotional aspect, and then just don't remove more than a third of the living plant when you're pruning, and kind of just go in with an architectural eye and sculpt. Think of you like you're doing topiary. You're not, yeah.
So the plant will forgive me and won't be traumatized.
Right. Yes.
You might be. So I was told if you have a sucker, I don't know about if it bears fruit, but if you have a sucker and you can create a whole new plant from it.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. You can make clones of the plant.
Yeah. And okay, one last question before you go. Jody's asking, I just planted some tomato starch. She's in Portland, Oregon. Is it too late? She's a small urban garden.
It would depend on the date of your last frost. So it's definitely too late here in Minnesota if you're just getting started, but it depends on the date of your last frost. So I'm not familiar with.
So just look up that type of tomato and find out like what's the gestation, like the gestation time, like does it take 79 days or 60 days, whatever, right?
Yep,
And
the
then
days to
check your-
maturity.
Yeah, till maturity. Yeah, and then check your frost date.
Yeah, I have a
So-
lot of volunteers coming up and I just kind of let some of them go and they're starting to set fruit now. And they came up much later than the ones I planted.
Yeah, just really depends on the plant. Okay, we're gonna let Haley go, and Lisa, I'll explain suckers because she already explained that earlier in the call. Thank you very much, Haley. This was super useful. Did everybody learn something? I learned something.
Yes, it's always a good day when you learn something new, so it's a good day.
It's a good day. Thank you. There's the suckers right there in the armpit of the plant. You want to take those suckers out. That was a fun job for my kids. They liked being able to say suckers. Getting them out.
Take that, you sucker.
Yeah. All right, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Haley, for joining us. We really appreciate it. Okay, everybody else, you can stay on the call and we will talk more about more growing food and answering questions.
So
yeah, go ahead.
speaking of tomatoes,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to share with everybody because I don't know, my
Okay.
my tomatoes are starting to come in. I have created, I'm gonna share my screen. I've created
Okay, good.
I did this today and I created a new page under resources. There's recipes. I only have one recipe there now, but for those of you who are getting harvest of cherry tomatoes, I put up my recipe for my cherry tomato pasta sauce and it is so delicious.
I can't wait.
So, and it's so easy. You just throw, as you just throw that I take a big bowl, I toss it with a little olive oil. This is about 2 to 3 cups. But every other day I was bringing in this much from the garden. And then you just roast them at 400 until they start to break. And then you set them aside and then you just saute the onions and the garlic and everything. And then you add this in with all the juice. And then I just stick it, they say you can put it in a blender, but I just stick an immersion blender in and then you'll see in the recipe. And then I would just take old containers that I'd saved and freeze it. I did try to do it with mason jars. As you can see here, but I learned a lesson not to fill them this much because I ended up throwing away a lot of mason jars. So,
Because they broke.
save old deli containers, whatever.
Okay.
And it's delicious. And when you reheat it up, it smells so fresh, like it just came out of the garden. So anyway, I just wanted to share that.
It's
And
great.
then
Wait, Anne, do you think I could do this with yellow tomatoes too? I'm going to have an enormous amount of.
I don't see why you could. I mean, I think you could even do it with larger tomatoes. You just have to, I would cut them up.
Right.
Because you don't take the skins off here. You're going to be blending it with the immersion blender. And by the way, I bought my immersion blender at Goodwill for like $2.
Yeah, I got mine at a yard
And
sale.
it's one of those kitchen tools that once you have it, you're going to wonder how you ever live without it.
Yeah. And the point of roasting them is that you have to get some of the water out, right? Because if you just throw a bunch of tomatoes in a pot and cook them, it's going to be very watery, like soupy tomato sauce.
Yeah, it's much more concentrated flavor. And I think the roasting just adds to it. Now, the one thing I want to specify, I grew a lot of cayenne peppers and then I dried them and make my own red pepper flakes. This do not skip.
Okay.
It doesn't make it spicy. You can make it as spicy as you want, but it just brings out the flavor. So don't skip that. But we're going to be adding more recipes. If anybody else has any great recipes for garden produce, I'm going to put up my my pesto recipe. But anyway, this is the first one and we're going to keep adding to it.
That's great. Thank you very much, Anne. Yeah, you can volunteer for the Neighborhood Food Network by being somebody who helps out Anne on the website with recipes or with,
Oh, wait.
recommendations or things like that. Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I have to share my screen again because I wanted to everybody, if you wanted to send me your pictures so we can do our garden gallery, but I want to share a picture I took the other day. It stopped me dead in my tracks.
Oh, look at this.
And look at this. It stopped me dead in my tracks. I was like, oh my God, the perfect progression.
It is. That's just beautiful.
And then I ended up pulling off the top 2 and I almost cried because it was so beautiful. I get a little nutty in the garden, people. I'm just amazed at what Mother Nature is doing. So
it's, yeah, I have this sign. This is into the garden I go to lose my mind and find my soul.
Where did you get that?
Gee, Anne, I wonder who sent that to me. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So, oh, Danielle would love to help. That's so great. Okay. So Danielle, you can email me at zen@momsacrossamerica.org. Moms Across America is the parent group right
yeah.
now. Of
So
Neighborhood.
Jody, you have a cookie sheet, a cookie pan that's got a lip to it.
Yeah, it has to have a lip. Yeah.
And I used parchment paper because then it was a little easier to kind of, you got to be kind of careful at first, and then you kind of make like a tunnel with the paper, and then you kind of slip it into the Dutch oven. I use one of those cast iron enamel coated Dutch ovens, and that seemed to work really good. But you can use any kind of a large pot.
I would just recommend using parchment paper for all cookie sheets, because usually they're aluminum or some kind of metal that you just don't want roasted into your food. So we put parchment paper down for
I
everything.
use those silicone mats too, but that doesn't work for this.
Okay, great. Yeah. So recipes, folks, you can add on recipes.
And pictures of your gardens, and if you like I said, just give us like a half of a paragraph to a paragraph of where you are and what you love growing, and we'll get these pictures up because people love to see what other people are doing.
Right, I'm just going to share some pictures from this weekend. My husband and I did like a date weekend away, but knowing me well as he does, he took me to a permaculture farm. And we stayed in like a box truck, they made it into a tiny house. So this is the view of this is a nearby farm, but this permaculture farm, I just have to tell you, it was one of the most, it was like, I found utopia. It's like an Eden. They had so many flowers and pollinate. These are tiny, tiny, tiny little bees that are like iridescent, pollinators. And they had wasps and butterflies, and this was inside the squash plant. They had all these different butterflies. Very sad news: monarch butterflies have been added to the endangered species list. We kind of knew that was going to happen. This is, I think, called a swallowtail type butterfly. It's yellow. There were a lot of black and blue ones too, and you can see that the tomato plants, we talked earlier, how they stake. They stake them with bamboo and have the strings that they weave them up into. And they have all kinds of flowers. I don't even know what kind of some of these flowers were, but let's see if I can make this one a little bit bigger. So they just have flowers everywhere, and they had certain beds that were in progression where they just planted certain things down. I think they had one that was just asparagus. And so let's see if I can go forward here now. They did a little stream and squash and all kinds of, like I said, flowers and butterflies. And oops, sorry, that was my dinner. That was poison ivy. Okay, these are some plants. I'm going to identify those later. And then we went to a farm that was run by the 12 tribes. And you may want to Google this and see if there's one around you. It's a religious community that feeds 300 families across the nation, and or maybe even more. It's probably even more. And in this particular farmers market run by the 12 tribes, and I almost got the same kind of picture as you, they have a farmers market every Sunday, and they sell food made directly from the farm, like pizza made with spelt grain, and everything on the pizza was from their gardens. And you can woof there. I believe this is purslane, very big purslane. And woofing is worldwide opportunities on organic farms. So if you sign up for woof, it's like $40 a year. You can volunteer on one of these farms. This is one of the members. He's been there for like 40 years. And for 4 hours a day, you work on the farm, and they give you, I believe it's 2 meals, maybe even all three meals. And so you learn how to garden and farm. This was organic nitrogen. I just wanted to take a picture of that. This was their tomato sort of tunnel house.
That looks like a Florida weave.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Now I know what that's called.
So my daughter did, for everybody, my daughter went woofing in New Zealand, and that was 5 years ago, and she hasn't come home.
Yeah, sorry, Anne. I might have had something to do with that. Tell her that she could do that in New Zealand. I'm so sorry. But she's having the time of her life. And you see how they planted marigolds here? This help keeps pests away from the tomatoes. Basil also helps. And so you can learn how to farm. Look at it. They had all this rosemary here. And what they do is they share the produce that they grow with other farms that don't, other groups. There's maybe 45 in Basin, Vermont. There's a 12 Tribes farm. There's some in Seattle. The ones up in Alaska are the ones that go fishing and get all the salmon, and then they ship it to the rest of the other, tribes. And so, they will so one farm grows tons of kale tons of kale. And so they use that for their kale bars. They sell protein bars, and they all sell something. They make or sell something like furniture or this farm in particular, the big red building back there processes yerba mate tea. It's called, what was the brand? Mate for, I don't know, some mate something. You've probably seen it in the store. So it comes from this 12 Tribes farm that processes it from their Brazilian counterparts. There's another group in Brazil. So I just wanted to share this, that you can do worldwide opportunities on organic farms.
So as far as that, the woofing goes, you can actually go look up. I just posted the link for the USA. I believe that I posted the link for the USA one, but you can go on there and put in your area, and there's farmers who only need help for a day, and you can go. Yeah. So you don't even need room and board.
Yeah. And this farm, they milk goats, and they make the most delicious goat milk drink. And they did this in Vermont too, the Woofer farm we went to there. Goat milk, matcha tea, or I don't know, maybe it was yerba mate, but I think it was matcha tea and peach juice. A cold drink in the morning, cold goat milk, matcha tea, and peach juice. And it's one of the most delicious drinks you've ever had. It's so good. And it's only goaty if people think, oh, I don't like goat milk, because if there's male goats around. So if the farm has only female goats, then the goat milk tastes delicious. It doesn't taste, like that, goaty taste that some people complain about. So just gorgeous farm, gorgeous, like I was in heaven. It was just so awesome. And here they are making their spelt, although I had the gluten-free crust, but they have spelt crust from the Vermont farm that we visited. And that's where they got their crust, and they were making all the ingredients right there. And these girls grew up on the farm, and they said they would not want to live anywhere else. They don't feel like cloistered or sheltered or anything like that. They pretty much don't watch any media at all. And they all
smart girls.
Yeah. They work together as a community. They have meetings every morning at 7 and I think every night at 6 before dinner. And when it's a spiritual gathering, right? And when they do their spiritual gathering, there's not one preacher standing up and saying, this is like the message of the day. People just step forward and they say something like, I was reading the Bible today and I was thinking about the message that David was giving and blah, blah, blah. And they say something. Right. And then somebody else will say, oh, I just learned from my brother, blah, 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 that this and that. Or somebody else will step up and start singing a song. And then the guitar player will start playing music, and then everybody will sing. Like, it's not led by one person. It's a community spiritual experience. And I just thought that was really cool to see the difference, between that and other types of religious, experiences. I
put the link to the 12 tribes down there. I believe that's the website, and they have a map on there where they have their other places. Of course, there's none in Wisconsin.
We actually have one in Massachusetts, right? Plymouth, Massachusetts, and they have a bakery and they have a restaurant, and they are an interesting group.
Yeah.
They're very interesting. They actually, there's some politics. They create some stir in Massachusetts.
Oh, they do? Yeah.
But that's
yeah. I mean, I'm not saying you don't have to be like-minded with their religion to go there. And
it's very interesting with the children, how they raise them. I love their food, and I love their philosophy. I'm just saying, this particular chapter or group. but they have quite a presence in Plymouth, Massachusetts,
I
which
did not know that. I've been to Plymouth many times. I didn't know there was a 12 tribes presence.
are they the group where they have a Sabbath on Friday nights?
I don't know. I know they have a dinner on Friday nights that we went to, and that's the only time they eat meat is on Friday nights. Yeah. So
Where did you go? Did you go to Vermont, or were you in North Carolina when you went
I
away?
was in Vermont at Basin Farm. We stayed there for 5 days back in 2017 for our National Toxin Free Tour. And we harvested like 2,000 bulbs of garlic and many boxes of kale. And my kids learned how to dehydrate the kale and still the process of them going into the kale bars, the protein bars. And we would work from maybe 8 in the morning or something, 8 or 9 in the morning till noon. And then they would jump in the river and then eat handfuls of raspberry, and they had the best time. They didn't argue at all. Like when you're outside harvesting garlic or washing garlic or harvesting kale or pulling weeds, there's no reason to be upset with anybody or argue. You're just in nature. And so the religious part was just one aspect of it. It was a learning experience for us. I'm not condoning or condemning, their religious beliefs, but it's just very interesting learning experience that I would suggest if people are interested in learning about farming and you're open to learning about different kinds of religions. It's very, very interesting. And they have a very strong presence in different places around the world. And one of them is in Germany, where Germany is not allowing homeschooling at all. And so they have some of their members that are like in prison because they homeschool their kids. And so this group, raises money and tries to help support them to get their members out of prison and stuff like that. So there's definitely politics that I'm not aware of. I'm right now just telling you about the garden part. Yeah. So does anybody have any questions about any kinds of other gardening? Now, Ann and I are not experts, but Ann has been doing this a lot more than I have. And Mark Doudlah is on the call right now. And I want to point out one of his comments. He is a regenerative organic farmer, and he has a lot of experience. And he said, as a reminder, please do not plant your tomatoes in the same spot every year. You want to move them around your garden. Has a lot to do with whatever they put in the soil and, what they take out of the soil. So that's why you have a garden planner, and Anne has very generously put a garden planner on our website, right? What is it called, the website, Anne? So that every year you can plan your garden and put things in different places. Don't just put them back in the same place. I think you want to put them where maybe you planted beans before, because beans put nitrogen in the soil. I'm not
Is
sure.
Mark still on?
He may not be able to communicate right now. I don't see. Yeah, there he is.
There he is. He's actually inside. You're not in a tractor. What's the matter?
It rained.
Oh, good. Well, good. That's good, right? Okay. So where do you want to plant tomatoes, Mark? But
I'm not a tomato expert, but certainly on what you're talking about. If you're not amending your garden with compost and things of that nature, then you definitely want to plant behind a legume. They are nitrogen users, in a big way. So I would certainly plant behind, but, I think it would be also advantageous for maybe a third or a quarter of your garden to go fallow into vetches, clovers, and some grasses, and then rotate those in.
Okay.
And then rotate some of your garden out. So I think that could be really, really beneficial. So I guess that's what I'd do, but I think it'd be beneficial if you could go behind a legume. But certainly you can compensate with compost. Fish is an excellent source of nitrogen, phosphorus, and actually potassium too. So that could be beneficial. The one thing I'd really stress, if you can't water, perfectly, please water in the morning, shut it off, let your plants dry out, because they are very susceptible to waterborne diseases. And that's true for your whole garden in general.
Okay. I've got to do better. I've been watering at night. It's been my way to sort of calm down at the end of the day and watch the fireflies as they come out. You're saying that's not good.
Yeah, and I'm thinking it's not, the sun's gone down. It's not going to burn, the water's not going to burn the plants and So, yeah.
Yeah, and the sunlight in the morning can damage. So if you look at a raindrop that's on a leaf, that becomes a magnifying glass. And so then it can burn a hole in the plant. That's a point of infection. Then you also have the raindrop impact that splashes soil up on the plant too, and any potential pathogens can get in. And they also do very well getting in the flowers. So usually the stem and the leaves are pretty hardy, but the flower is susceptible to letting pathogens in. So, you know, maybe you want to trim off more of your flowers on the bottom, so you don't have so much potential for that raindrop splash impact, getting dirt into the flowers and then potential pathogens. But I would really suggest mulching the bottom just to get away from that problem. Plus, if you have any tomatoes then sitting on the ground, if we're not trellising perfectly, they'll also be preserved if they're on some sort of mulch that dries out versus the soil.
So what about composting the tomato plants when you pull them up? Because Frankie says she puts them all into the trash. She never composts them.
I'm not a proponent of throwing anything away that grew in your soil. So composting, if you do it right, takes it through a 160-degree heat cycle, which will disengage most of all diseases. Yeah, there's a few things maybe that can slip by it, but no, I guess I don't feel that way at all. So I think any green material should be composted or lightly tilled into the soil in the top 2 inches. Please stay in the aerobic zone, right? Don't put your organic matter or green, brown, carbon at 6 or 8 inches deep, unless you're doing that for a reason. Some farmers, we have a field that we had to plow 10 inches deep because we had to pull the Canadian thistle rhizomes to the surface to be able to kill the Canada thistle. But other than that, you know, fence posts rot in the top 4 inches of soil. They don't rot any further down. That's the aerobic zone. So you want to incorporate that material into that 0 to 3 inches deep, you know, and the same with your cover crops, right? Don't till them in any deeper than that. That's
0 to 3 inches for cover crops to till in.
Yeah, that's biodynamic system practices, you know, and certainly there's regenerative and no-till. I would suggest everybody to buy some rye, cereal ryegrass, and plant it maybe end of September. And then get yourself a 2x4 long string that goes up over your neck and bolt an angle iron on to the bottom of the 2x4. And then crimp that rye, and you can do a no-till organic garden that will automatically suppress the weeds.
So when do you crimp it, in the spring?
After it reaches anthesis, which is full flower. And you will actually, you know, in our fields, we see a dust storm in the spring. That's actually rye pollen. I'm not sure, you know, based on your size, you'd have to be there at the right moment to see that in your garden, right? But certainly when you see anthers falling onto the ground, that's the little floret parts, right? When they drop off and fall to the ground, you're ready to crimp.
So there's a bunch of different kinds of ryegrass. So there's winter rye, perennial rye.
No, cereal rye.
Okay.
So winter cereal rye, not annual, not perennial ryegrass. That's a completely different animal.
Winter cereal ryegrass, and you
rye.
You want to crimp it before the flowers fall off, or when they're falling?
And don't add grass to the word rye.
Okay.
Winter cereal rye. It's not a ryegrass. Ryegrass would be a lawn grass. Okay, completely different.
So you want to crimp it before the flowers fall off in order to avoid seeding, or when they're falling off? When do you want to crimp it again?
So what happens, that rye plant needs to sense the hormone from the seed head being translocated to the root of the plant. Once it senses that it went through its reproduction, then you can crimp it and kill the rye, and the root system will not regrow because it's already sensed that it sets seed. If you crimp it before it pollinates, then it thinks that it hasn't completed its life cycle, and it throws up a new stalk from the root, right? And tries to set seed again. So you want to crimp it after it's pollinated.
Okay. And that doesn't run the risk of having more seeds drop and growing more when you don't want it to?
No, and if they do grow in that same year, they're going to stay like lawn grass. They will stay less than 6 to 8 inches tall, right? Because they're out of sync. They're used to being planted in the late fall, vernalizing, and then growing in the spring. And then that vernalization is what allows them to bolt up and put their fruiting heads on in the spring. If they never vernalize, they never will bolt and get to 5 feet tall.
Okay.
You can imagine crimping in then something 5 feet tall into the surface of the garden, how we armor the soil and protect it from weeds, and also prevent a lot of evapotranspiration from the soil itself.
So I found a website that's got organic cereal rye seeds at 84 cents a pound. So you get a 50-pound bag for $42.
Okay. maybe you guys can rye on the farm, yeah. There's some upcycle there, but rye on the farm is, $10-12 a bushel. So if you can find a farmer that has cereal rye, $10-12 a bushel, but you got to pay for the inconvenience too, right? You're paying for bagging and everything else. So that's all part of it, right? The smaller the units get, the more expensive it is. But
Okay,
So Mark, do you know any farmers in Wisconsin that has any?
I know a couple. We have not harvested our rye yet, but you want to be a little careful of ours because we have vetch in ours, and not everybody wants vetch in their garden. So if you're looking for pure rye, you don't probably want ours.
Okay, we need to get to Jody's question and then we're going to close out because it's just about 9:30. Jody planted fava beans in her small urban curbside strip. She wants to know, do I turn everything under, including the beans, or can I save the beans if the pods have gone dark?
You can certainly save some of the seed, and you can turn some of it under. But fava beans have an excellent taproot, loosen up the soil, provide lots of nitrogen. So that's a great one. But you can definitely save some seed. You bet. You can do both. You bet.
Great. Yeah. Once the pod dries out, then the plant stops fruiting, right? Then you save those seeds. You just dry them out, right? On a plate or
dry them out, put them in the sun or whatever. Yep. Try to prevent them from getting re-wet, right, by the rain or something. But you could put them out on a picnic table as long as you got sun. Yep, absolutely.
That's great. Well, thanks for being on tonight, Mark. We really appreciate your expertise, and thank you everybody for joining us on the Neighborhood Food Network call tonight. And if you want to have more of your street members, your neighbors, join into the Neighborhood Food Network, we urge you to be the one to start it. And that would mean going to our website and just clicking on resources, and then let me screen share, clicking on resources and our flyers and brochures and meeting tools. And so what you can do is print out a flyer and pass it around to your neighbors, and know it is not too late, because right now is the time to start talking about and planning and starting your fall garden. And fall gardening is even easier because there's less pests. So we've got a sign-up sheet you can download. We've got a first meeting for an outline for your first meeting. We have food quantities needed data sheets. This is just like information to get started on sort of planning how much food you would need for your whole street, for everybody to be fed on your street. We have a neighborhood food network brochure now. We have it in color and black and white. And we also have one that's maybe you want to get started doing this, which is just passing out and where did it go to? Okay, here you go. An email saying that I'm initiating an email group to connect the people on our street in case of emergency only, right? So it would be an email group where everybody would on your street, each household would be represented ideally. And you would use the email group only for emergency situations or for goodwill, like for offers of goodwill, like, if somebody has free zucchini to give away or to trade. Or you may use this list to invite you to a street gathering to discuss emergency preparedness, trash pickup days, or street gatherings to meet and greet, right? There's no requirement of any kind. So we just really urge you to get to know your neighbors because number one, it's a great thing to do. It's really exciting and fun, and we need more of this. We need more connection, less isolation. And number two, if there were a crisis to happen, you want to be connected with your neighbors and not and sort of like have your neighbors be a threat, because it only takes 9 missed meals for a person to resort to violence to feed their family. So we don't want to be a threat. We don't want our neighbors to be a threat. We want to be working together. So you can join us on the Neighborhood Food Network. And if you sign up to be a host, which I think 95 people have signed up to be hosts, we just sent that list to Baker Creek. They're sending free seeds packets to our hosts. So if you sign up to be a host, you will get free seeds, but they are for you to give out to your neighbors, right? When you have a meeting. So this is where you're making a commitment to have a meeting, to have people over. Could be 6 people that might show up, could be a couple dozen, but usually it's only a small percentage of the people that you invite, right? It takes time for this to take off. So we urge you to do that. And then Carol Grieve, who's not on the call today, but she's the head of food integrity now. She's one of our Moms Across America board members. She started a Facebook group for her street. She has a community area called Plateau. And so she started Plateau Neighborhood Food Network on Facebook and has 40 members already. So people in her neighbor are getting together, and what they're agreeing to do is to trade. So if somebody has too many lemons, they're trading with somebody who has too many oranges. And that way she said all week she's been hard. Somebody said, I have an apple tree with too many apples, come take them. So she went and got apples. One time she went and got, I don't know, it was prunes or plums or something. And so she's been canning all week. She's like, I have so much food in my house now, I don't know what to do with it. So like, if you start connecting with your neighbors and she's making friends, and we'll have to have her on one of the calls in the future to share about that. So thank you very much for being on the call tonight, everybody. And we'll see you next week. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Thanks, Ann.
Susie,
Thanks, Ann.
Lisa,
Bye-bye.
Chris, thank you, everybody. Take care.